The room is dark, except for the glow of the combat screens, and you can hear the soft whir of air conditioning working harder than it should. A cluster of tiny tracks blooms on the radar like a stain spreading through water. Fast, messy, multiplying. Someone whispers, "That's not one drone." And your stomach tightens because you can already see the count climbing. At first, it feels manageable. The ship is built for threats, missiles, aircraft, the kind of things that come one at a time with a name and a trajectory. But this is different. This is a swarm, cheap, small, and not asking permission to be taken seriously. The screen keeps adding dots, and the system's calm voice keeps updating, while your brain starts doing the one math problem you never wanted to do under pressure. How many shots do we actually have? This is Battletech Declassified, Modern Warfare explained. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A modern warship can be strong, fast, and terrifying, and still lose to something that looks like a box of angry insects. Not because the ship is weak, but because defense has a hard limit. Missiles run out, guns overheat, lasers need time, computers need certainty, humans need seconds. And a swarm's entire strategy is to steal all of those things at once. So in this episode, we're going to break down why drone swarms can crack billion-dollar defenses, and why the key is not one superweapon, it is the brutal logic of saturation. By the end, you will be able to look at a swarm and feel, in your bones, whether the ship is safe or already outnumbered. Imagine a castle with perfect walls, thick stone, guarded gates, archers on towers, boiling oil ready. Now imagine the attackers do not bring one big siege tower. They bring 10,000 ladders. The walls did not get worse. The problem changed shape. That is what a swarm does. It changes the shape of the fight, from quality to quantity. Warships are built around the idea that threats are expensive and rare. If an incoming missile costs millions, you can justify firing an expensive interceptor to stop it. But a swarm flips the table. It asks a different question. Not, can you stop one? But can you stop all of us before we touch you? This is why swarm warfare feels unfair. The defender has to be perfect repeatedly. The attacker only needs a few moments of overload. Your radar can be amazing, but it still has to track, classify, and prioritize. Your weapons can be lethal, but they still have to reload and cool and choose. And every time you shoot at a drone, you spend something that does not come back quickly. Time, ammunition, attention. That is the first rule we're going to live by today. A swarm is not trying to win a dogfight. It is trying to force a system to make too many decisions with too few resources. Let's build the simplest version of the problem. Picture a ship with a magazine. Basically, its pantry of defensive shots. Inside are missiles for long range, maybe a gun system for close range, and a few layers in between. Each layer has a rate, how fast it can shoot, and a depth, how many shots it has. Now, picture the swarm as a conveyor belt. Drones arrive in groups, sometimes from different directions, sometimes at different heights, sometimes mixing decoys with real drones. The ship sees a growing menu of targets, but it cannot order everything. It must choose. Here is the part people miss. Even if one interceptor has a high chance of kill, it is still one shot per target, and sometimes more than one. If a drone is cheap, and you need 2 expensive shots to guarantee it dies, the attacker is smiling. Not because the drone is magical, but because your certainty is expensive. So the true battlefield is not the sky. It is the spreadsheet behind the sky. How many targets per minute? How many shots per minute? How many seconds to decide? How many seconds to reload? How many minutes until the ship is empty? Imagine a countdown you cannot pause. T plus 60 seconds. The ship is still calm. Sensors are tracking. Operators are labeling. T plus 45. The first shots begin. T plus 30. The tactical picture is cluttered. The system is juggling priorities. T plus 15. The ship is choosing which targets are allowed to live for a few more seconds. T plus 5. You feel it, not as fear, but as a cold certainty that the ship is no longer defending, it is triaging. That is saturation. It is the moment the incoming rate becomes greater than the defensive capacity. Think of it like water pouring into a bucket. If you can scoop water out faster than it pours in, you survive. If the water pours in faster than you can scoop, the bucket does not care how skilled you are, it will overflow. A swarm's goal is to create overflow on purpose, not by being stronger than your weapons, but by being faster than your loop, faster than your sensors can confirm, faster than your command team can decide, faster than your weapons can cycle. And once overflow starts, everything gets worse. At the same time, mistakes increase. Classification gets sloppy. Ammunition disappears. The calm voice becomes frantic updates. That is why a swarm feels like a trap, because it attacks your ability to stay organized. Now, let's talk money, because money is physics in slow motion. Warren Buffett has a simple instinct. If you spend $1 to stop a 1-cent problem, you can win the battle and still lose the war. That is the swarm's business model. It turns your defense into a bad deal. Think of your ship like a luxury car with a tiny fuel tank. It can do incredible things, but only for as long as its resources last. If the attacker can force you to burn fuel every second, they are not racing you, they are draining you. This is why cheap drones is not a meme. It is leverage. The attacker is buying attempts. The defender is buying guarantees. Attempts are often cheaper than guarantees, and a swarm weaponizes that price gap. Ray Dalio would call this a system under stress, where the constraints become visible. When everything is calm, the system looks unbeatable. Under pressure, the hidden bottlenecks appear: the reload time, the tracking capacity, the number of simultaneous engagements, the human attention span. A swarm is basically a stress test that arrives at high speed. Let's move from money back to senses. The ocean looks empty, which is exactly why it is dangerous. The horizon is a hard line, and below it, anything small can hide. Drones can fly low, skim waves, use terrain, use weather, use clutter. On radar, the sea itself is noisy, like trying to hear a whisper in a crowded room. This matters because detection is time. Every second you detect earlier is one more second to classify, one more second to choose a layer, one more second to fire before the swarm gets close. But small targets reduce that time. And swarms love mixing signals. Some drones are loud on purpose, some are quiet. Some are decoys designed to look like something bigger. The ship sees a puzzle that changes every few seconds, and the puzzle is rigged to waste your attention. So when people say, just shoot them all, they are skipping the first pain point. You cannot shoot what you have not confirmed. You cannot confirm everything fast enough when the sky is full of maybes. This is where the real weapon shows up. The kill chain. Not a missile, not a gun, not a laser. The kill chain is the process. Find, track, identify, decide, engage, assess. It is a conveyor belt of decisions, and a swarm's dream is to jam the belt until it snaps. Charlie Munger would tell you to avoid single-cause thinking. A ship does not fail because it lacks one gadget. It fails because several small delays stack up. 1 second lost to classification. 1 second lost to coordination. 1 second lost to a weapon cycle. 10 seconds later, you are in the close-in zone. And now every mistake costs more. Swarms exploit compounding, like interest, but in reverse. Your small delays compound into overload. Their small advantages compound into penetration. This is why a swarm can win without being better at flying or shooting. It only needs to be better at forcing you to hesitate. So when we say saturation math, we do not just mean ammunition. We mean the math of time, attention, certainty, and coordination. The ship is not fighting drones. It is fighting the clock. Now let's put you in the chair. The tracks are coming in. Your screen shows multiple directions. Your team asks, do we fire now or hold? This is the defender's dilemma. Fire early and you risk wasting shots on decoys. Hold, and you risk letting the swarm get inside the range, where everything becomes chaos. If you fire expensive missiles at cheap drones, you may be doing exactly what the attacker wants. If you wait for closer defenses, like guns or CIWS, you may be waiting too long for the volume. If you rely on electronic warfare, you may succeed brilliantly. Or you may discover the swarm has autonomy and does not need your signals. This is why swarms are psychological weapons. They force you to make decisions that feel wrong no matter what. Spend too much now, lose later. Save too much now, die now. And that feeling, that tightness in the chest when you realize every option has a cost, that is the true pressure of modern naval defense. It is not just metal and software. It is command judgment under flooding information. Here is the simplest saturation math you can carry in your head. Ask 2 questions. First, how many threats can you stop per minute? Second, how many threats are arriving per minute? If arrivals are higher than stops, the difference accumulates like debt. Now add one more reality. You do not stop a threat with one action. You stop it with a chain of actions. Detect, decide, engage, confirm. Every step takes time. Every step can be disrupted. That means your stops per minute is not fixed. Under stress, it usually drops. Meanwhile, the swarm can increase arrivals. It can change direction. It can split. It can reroute. It can arrive in pulses to create moments of overload. So the attacker controls the tempo, and tempo is everything. So when you hear a $50,000 swarm can beat a $2 billion warship, what they really mean is this. The swarm can buy enough arrivals per minute to exceed your stops per minute for long enough that something gets through. That is the entire trick, and it is terrifying because it is not science fiction. It is just arithmetic with consequences. Let's make the arithmetic feel real without drowning in numbers. Imagine your ship can handle, say, a handful of engagements at once, because each engagement is a conversation between sensors, software, and weapons. Now imagine the swarm is not a handful. It is dozens, then hundreds, and it is not arriving politely in a line. The ship's systems start to behave like a busy restaurant. When it is quiet, service is perfect. When a tour bus arrives, everything slows, the kitchen bottlenecks, orders get mixed up, and the staff makes faster, rougher decisions. The restaurant did not become worse. It hit capacity. A swarm is the tour bus on purpose. It is volume designed to trigger bottlenecks. It is decoys designed to create wrong orders. It is timing designed to arrive when you are already busy. And if you want one image to remember, it is this. Defense is not a wall. It is a queue. Swarms win by making the queue longer than your ability to process. So what actually stops a swarm? Not in theory, but in principle. You need 3 types of tools. Tools that reduce arrivals, tools that increase stops, and tools that buy time. Electronic warfare can reduce arrivals by breaking coordination, or by making the drones blind, or by forcing them into safe modes. Decoys can buy time by pulling weapons and attention away from the real threats. Close-in systems can increase stops per minute when the swarm is near, because they can fire fast, but they still have limits. Lasers can be a powerful piece, especially against small targets, but they have constraints. Weather, dwell time, energy management. The key is that none of these is a silver bullet. They are ingredients. A playbook combines them so their weaknesses overlap less. You use EW to thin and confuse, decoys to misdirect, hard kill to finish what remains. Season 2 is about that playbook. The counter-swarm playbook is not one weapon. It is how you choreograph the whole defense so the swarm never reaches the overflow point. Now let's lock in what you've learned so far. A swarm is not scary because each drone is strong. A swarm is scary because it attacks the limits of your system. It attacks magazine depth, cycle time, tracking capacity, and human decision speed. Saturation is the moment your defense becomes a triage problem, the moment arrivals beat stops, the moment your best technology starts behaving like a stressed-out queue. And the strongest mental shortcut is this. When you evaluate defense, do not ask, can it kill a drone? Ask, can it kill enough drones fast enough while still deciding correctly? That is the difference between a cool demo video and a real fight. Next up, we will step into the most fragile part of the whole chain, detection and identification. Because if you cannot see clearly, every other layer becomes guesswork, and guesswork is exactly what the swarm wants. Back in the dark room, the tracks keep blooming. The system recommends engagements, but recommendations are not decisions. Someone says, "We're going to need to start prioritizing." And you can hear the shift in the room, from confidence to calculation. Because here is the next nightmare. The swarm does not need to destroy you with perfect aim. It can destroy you by forcing you to waste time and shots on the wrong things. It can turn your certainty into a luxury you cannot afford. And the moment you fire, you reveal your own rhythm. You reveal your reload time. You reveal your engagement doctrine. You reveal how you think. A smart attacker watches that like a poker player watching a twitch. So as we move forward, keep one question in your mind. When the sky is full of targets, how does a warship decide what is real, what is a decoy, and what is the one drone that must not reach the ship? The answer starts with what your sensors can truly see and what they can be tricked into believing. The sea at night is a black mirror, and that's the problem. Anything small can hide in the noise, and the noise is everywhere. Salt spray, wave tops, rain bands, birds, even the ship's own movement, all of it creates clutter that looks like life on a screen. A drone swarm doesn't have to be invisible. It just has to be confusing, long enough to steal your time. The first battle is not missiles versus drones. It is clarity versus chaos. And clarity is expensive. It costs processing power, trained operators, clean data, and seconds you do not have. You can feel this in the way the team talks. When the picture is clean, people speak in certainties. Track this, engage that. When the picture is messy, the language shifts. Maybe, possible, could be. Every maybe is a pause. Every pause is distance eaten. So if you want to understand why swarms work, start here. They weaponize uncertainty. They turn your radar into a crowded hallway and your decision-making into trying to find one face in a moving crowd. A warship has eyes, but it does not have one pair of eyes. It has a whole committee. Radar, infrared, electro-optical cameras, electronic support measures that listen for signals, data links that pull information from other ships, helicopters, drones, aircraft. Each sensor has strengths and blind spots. Radar sees far, but can struggle with tiny low flyers in sea clutter. Infrared can spot heat, but hates fog and heavy moisture. Cameras can confirm shapes, but need line of sight and time to focus. Signal listening can find emitters, but a quiet swarm can be radio silent and still deadly. This is why a swarm is like a magician. It doesn't fight your strength. It aims at your blind spots. Low altitude, cluttered background, multiple approaches, and a mix of decoys that tempt the sensors into tracking the wrong things. And there is a hard lesson here. The more sensors you have, the more data you have to fuse. Data fusion is powerful, but fusion under stress is like trying to merge 10 group chats into one clear plan while the building is on fire. Now think about the horizon. It is not just a view, it is a limit. A ship's radar cannot see through the earth. If a drone flies low, it can stay hidden until it is closer. And closer means less time. That is why swarms love low altitude. It shrinks your early warning window. It forces you into shorter range defenses faster. It compresses the fight until it becomes a sprint. And here is the punchline. When time compresses, mistakes grow. Your classification gets rougher. Your engagement rules become more aggressive. You shoot earlier, and sometimes at the wrong things. That is not incompetence. It is the predictable shape of a system pushed past its comfortable decision speed. If you want a mental image, imagine a door slowly opening in daylight. You can see who is coming. Now, imagine the same door being kicked open in darkness. You might still respond, but you respond with less information. A low-flying swarm kicks the door open. Let's talk about decoys, because decoys are like fake keys on a keychain. They look real enough that you can waste the exact thing the attacker wants you to waste. In swarm warfare, decoys are not a side trick. They are a central strategy. A decoy drone can be designed to be loud on radar, or to broadcast signals that make it look important. It can be built to pull your gaze the way a bright screen steals your attention in a dark room. So the swarm sends a few loud targets first. Your system flags them as priorities. Your team feels pressure to act. Your expensive interceptors leap off the rails and chase the shiny objects. Meanwhile, the quieter drones, the real threat, close the distance. That is the economic attack again. Not only can the attacker buy quantity, they can buy your reactions. They can turn your best weapon into a distracted guard dog sprinting after thrown sticks. This is where rules of engagement become a trap. In peacetime, you need certainty to fire. In war, you need speed. A swarm tries to put you in the worst possible middle ground, where you have just enough doubt to hesitate and just enough urgency to act too early. If you fire early at every possible track, you drain your magazine and you signal your doctrine. If you hold fire waiting for confirmation, you shrink your options until only close-range systems remain. Close-range systems can be deadly, but they are the last line, and the last line is where things happen fast and messy. So commanders build decision frameworks. They set thresholds. They define what counts as hostile. They define what assets deserve protection. They assign priorities. And a swarm exists to stress those frameworks until they crack. Because the ugly truth is this: under saturation, the fight is no longer about perfect defense. It becomes about acceptable loss. What are you willing to risk? What are you willing to sacrifice? And can you make that choice before the swarm makes it for you? Now we reach the moment where electronic warfare enters the story like a fog machine. EW is the art of messing with what the enemy sees, hears, and believes. It can cut coordination, distort navigation, and confuse targeting. If a swarm depends on remote control or data links, EW can be devastating. Jam the control link, and the drones may lose guidance. Spoof GPS, and they may drift. Flood the air with noise, and their sensors might struggle to pick a clean signal. This is why EW feels like magic. You are not shooting the drones. You are pulling the floor out from under their brain. And if it works, you can stop many threats without spending many shots. But here is the catch. The more autonomous the swarm is, the less it needs the links you can jam. If the drones can navigate by inertial systems, by visual cues, or by pre-planned paths, they may keep coming even in silence. That's why EW is not a guarantee. It is a leverage tool, a way to reduce arrivals and buy time, not a button that ends the story. The counter-swarm playbook starts to emerge now. Picture it like a layered trap. The outer layer is information. Detect early, classify fast, share tracks across the fleet. The middle layer is confusion. EW, deception, decoys, anything that breaks coordination. The inner layer is violence, missiles, guns, CIWS, lasers, the hard kill tools that finish what survives. Swarms are dangerous when all three layers fail at once. You detect late, you confuse little, and you are forced to fight with your last line while the sky is full. So the key is not just add lasers or add more missiles. The key is to shape the fight so your last line never becomes your main line. Your best day is when your close-in system never has to fire. Because if it is firing non-stop, you are already in the overflow zone. Think of it like home security. The best security is not the last lock. It's the street light, the camera, the alarm, the dog, and the neighbors. By the time someone reaches your last lock, the system has already failed multiple times. There is one more brutal constraint: the magazine. Even if your weapons are perfect, your ship carries a finite number of interceptors. Some ships can reload at sea, but not quickly, not during a fight. So a swarm can turn your ship into a person who brought one bottle of water into a desert and then got forced to sprint. This is why defenders obsess over shot doctrine. How many shots per target? When to use expensive interceptors? When to rely on cheaper guns? When to accept risk? And a swarm tries to force you to pick the expensive option repeatedly. You can hear it in the command room. 2 shots to be sure. Confirm kill. Engage again. Every extra shot is insurance, and insurance feels wise until it empties your pantry. Now picture the attacker smiling, because they do not need to win with the first wave. They can win by making your first wave response expensive. Then the second wave arrives when you are tired and low on options. This is the compounding again, not just of time, but of depletion. The fleet is not one ship, it is a network, and networks can be strengths or weaknesses. If ships share tracks, coordinate engagements, and allocate targets, they can multiply defensive capacity. But networks also create dependencies. If your data link is jammed, if communications are disrupted, coordination suffers. A swarm can attack the network indirectly. It can force multiple ships to engage at once, stretching coordination. It can target sensors, target airborne relays, target the platforms that provide the clearest picture. It can create enough chaos that each ship begins to fight its own private war. This is why modern defense is as much about software and doctrine as it is about steel. If the fleet acts like an orchestra, it can handle complexity. If it acts like a group of soloists, it wastes effort and runs out of shots faster. So in the counter-swarm playbook, one of the most important weapons is simply this: a shared picture, a shared plan, and a pre-decided rule for who shoots what, so you do not double shoot the same decoy while a real drone slips through. Now, let's bring you back to the sensory moment. The ship's deck vibrates faintly as systems spin up. You can hear the different tones of alarms, each one a small slice of urgency. Operators speak faster, but their voices are controlled because panic is contagious, is less than #0. 2# is greater than. This is where training becomes real. In training, targets are clean. In training, the instructor can pause. In reality, the swarm does not pause. The ocean does not pause. Your own body does not pause. Your heartbeat accelerates. Your hands sweat. Your mouth dries. This is why the playbook matters. A playbook is a way to move fast, without thinking from scratch. It's like muscle memory for a team. If you have to invent your doctrine during the attack, you are already behind. So the big question is not, can we shoot drones? It's, can we execute a repeatable sequence of actions faster than the swarm can overwhelm it? That is what separates a dramatic story from a survivable reality. We need to name the real enemy now. The real enemy is not the drone. It is the gap between detection and destruction. The gap where uncertainty lives. The gap where command teams argue. The gap where the system asks for confirmation. The gap where your best weapon is waiting for permission. A swarm tries to live in that gap. It tries to make the gap wider. It does this with decoys, with silence, with multiple vectors, with timing. It creates a fog where every decision is either late or wasteful. So the counter-swarm playbook is essentially a plan to collapse the gap, shorten detection time, simplify classification, pre-decide priorities, use EW to buy seconds, use deception to waste the attacker's time instead of wasting yours. And that leads us to the next step, because if you cannot see clearly, you will always be paying inexpensive shots. The next segment is where we zoom in on the hardest part of the entire fight, identifying what is real in a sky full of tricks. A new set of tracks appears, but these ones are strange. They are too clean, too symmetrical, moving like they want to be noticed. Your instinct should be relief, because clean tracks are easier to hit. But your stomach tightens again, because clean tracks can also be bait. Someone says, those could be decoys, and suddenly the room feels smaller, because now you are not just fighting drones, you are fighting your own doubt. This is the moment swarms love, when your certainty fractures, when the team splits into different interpretations, when you lose time to discussion. So here is the cliff edge we're about to step over. How does a ship tell the difference between a loud decoy and a quiet killer? How does it classify in time? How does it avoid spending its best shots on the wrong targets? Because if you cannot solve that, it does not matter how many layers you have. The swarm will turn your layers into a misfiring machine, and all it needs is one opening, 1 second, one drone that you labeled wrong. To tell a decoy from a killer, you need a habit that feels boring in peacetime and life-saving in war. You cross-check. 1 sensor is a rumor. 2 sensors are a story. 3 sensors are a pattern. A loud track on radar is not enough. You want to know if infrared sees heat where it should. You want to know if cameras can confirm a shape. You want to know if electronic sensors hear anything that matches a control link. You want to know if the target behaves like a machine with a mission or like a cheap object designed to be noticed. But here is the trap again. Cross-checking takes time, and a swarm trades you time for doubt. It wants you to hesitate just long enough that the quiet drones cross the horizon line and enter the close zone where everything gets louder and faster. So the playbook has to include a decision rule, a threshold where you act even with imperfect certainty, because perfect certainty is a luxury during saturation. This is where doctrine becomes a weapon. Doctrine is what you do before you have time to think. It is preloaded judgment. A fleet can decide, for example, that any object approaching at a certain speed, altitude, and direction inside a certain corridor is treated as hostile. It can decide that certain assets, like an aircraft carrier or an amphibious ship, get priority coverage. It can decide that loud tracks with decoy behavior get cheaper defenses first, while uncertain but dangerous tracks get attention from sensors and EW. The point is not to be right 100%. The point is to stay organized while the attacker tries to make you improvise. A swarm wants you inventing rules mid-fight. Doctrine keeps you moving. And when doctrine is good, it does something powerful. It prevents emotional spending. It stops you from launching the most expensive interceptors just because the room feels tense. Now imagine the defense as a budget, not just money, but budget of attention. Your operators can only stare at so many screens. Your command team can only handle so many conversations. Your system can only process so many tracks with high confidence at once. A swarm tries to bankrupt that attention budget. It creates more targets than you can care about. It creates more ambiguity than you can resolve. It creates more urgency than you can calmly prioritize. So a smart defense does the opposite. It simplifies. It groups targets. It sets automatic engagement zones. It uses EW to reduce the number of meaningful tracks. It uses decoys to pull threats into predictable lanes. It tries to turn a chaotic sky into a manageable flow. This is why counter-swarm defense is often less about heroic shooting and more about boring pre-planning. The most impressive moment is when the ship never looks busy, because the playbook prevented the overload from happening. Let's zoom in on the moment a commander hates: the close-in zone. When drones are close enough that even tiny delays feel fatal. Here, speed beats elegance. This is where fast-firing guns and close-in weapon systems matter. This is where lasers can shine if conditions allow. This is where decoys can still help by confusing terminal guidance. This is where the ship becomes a creature bristling with reflexes. But this zone is also where the swarm's volume is most deadly, because close-in systems can be fast, but they are not infinite. They have arc limits, tracking limits, cooling limits, ammunition limits. Under enough targets, even a rapid-fire system becomes a queue again. So the playbook's goal is to arrive at this zone with as few threats remaining as possible. If you enter the close-in zone with the full swarm intact, you are already in the overflow story. Now we can state the second rule of saturation math. A defense layer is not a backup plan. It is a timer. Each layer buys you time to use the next layer effectively. Long-range interceptors are not just about distance. They are about time to re-engage and time to classify. Mid-range tools are not just about coverage. They are about sorting the flow. Close-range tools are not just about lethality. They are about saving the ship when everything else leaked. If you treat layers like separate shields, you miss the real design. Layers are an assembly line. The output of one layer is the workload of the next. If the first layer is sloppy, the last layer drowns. So when people argue about which weapon is best, they are asking the wrong question. The right question is, how do the layers share the workload so no single layer gets overwhelmed? There is a final psychological trick swarms use. They make you feel alone. Under pressure, a ship can start acting like it is the only one in the world. But fleets are designed to fight as a team. If one ship sees early, it can warn others. If one ship has the best sensor angle, it can share tracks. If one ship has spare missiles, it can take engagements while another conserves. If airborne assets can extend the horizon, they can stretch the time window that swarms try to shrink. The counter-swarm playbook, therefore, includes coordination as a weapon. Not just communications, but pre-assigned roles. Who is the sensor picket? Who is the shooter? Who is the decoy launcher? Who is the command relay? This is how you stop a swarm from turning your fleet into separate targets. You stay an orchestra, not a group of soloists. Let's compress everything into one picture you can remember. On one side is the swarm. Its superpower is arrivals per minute. It can scale. It can pulse. It can split. It can distract. It can be cheap enough to try again. On the other side is the ship. Its superpower is stops per minute, but only if the kill chain stays clean. If detection is early, if classification is good enough, if doctrine is clear, if EW buys seconds, if layers share the load, then stops per minute stays high and the overflow never arrives. So the fight is not drones versus missiles. It is tempo versus capacity. It is time versus workload. It is whether your system can stay coherent while the attacker tries to flood it. And now you can see why the story always returns to the kill chain. Because the kill chain is where capacity is created or destroyed. Back in that dark room, the difference between survival and catastrophe is suddenly not heroic. It is procedural. It is whether the team follows the playbook when the screen becomes a storm of dots. You hear the calls. Short, practiced, calm. You see engagements allocated. You see decoys deployed to pull the swarm into predictable lanes. You see EW shaping the air. And you see the defense layers acting like a machine, not like panic. If it works, it feels almost anticlimactic. The swarm thins. The close-in system fires briefly, not desperately. The remaining tracks drift, break, or die. The room exhales, slowly, like everyone had been holding their breath for a minute too long. If it fails the same way. Not because the ship lacked power, but because the queue overflowed. Because too many targets reached the close-in zone at the same time. Because one small uncertainty stole one big second. So what is the core lesson of Episode 1? Saturation is not a vibe, it is math. The math of arrivals versus stops. The math of time windows versus decision loops, the math of ammunition versus patience. And the counter-swarm playbook is not a gadget list. It is a choreography that prevents overflow. Detect earlier, classify faster, decide with doctrine, confuse the swarm with EW and deception. Finish with hard kill only when needed. Coordinate across the fleet so you do not fight alone. If you remember only one metaphor, make it this. A swarm is a flood. Your ship is a drainage system. You do not beat floods by building one perfect pipe. You beat floods by building a network that keeps flow under control. That is modern naval survival. Not just strength, but flow control under pressure. But we have not solved the hardest problem yet. Everything we discussed assumes you can tell what is real and what is bait. And that is exactly where swarms evolve. They get smarter at deception. They get quieter. They get more autonomous. They blend into clutter. So the next episode goes straight to the front door of the entire playbook. Detection. Because if you detect late, you compress time. If you classify wrong, you waste shots. And if you cannot build a clean picture early, every other layer becomes a desperate last stand. In the next episode, we break down how fleets actually detect a swarm, why they still miss it, and how the horizon, sea clutter, and sensor fusion decide whether you get minutes to respond or only seconds. Start when you are ready, because once you understand detection, you will never look at an empty ocean the same way again.